On June 11th, 2022, was the rematch greatest women's fight ever, or even the greatest UFC fight despite gender, when Weili defended her title against Joanna Jedrzejczyk for the women's strawweight title, where they continued the awesome battle that they started at UFC 248. Here's the story behind how all this happened today on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide to a rapid deep dive into sports history every day. And the trivia question to listen out for today is, who was the first UFC champion to be from China? Now, to start out with, let's jump into both of these fighters and their weight class. First off, they both end up fighting in the straw weight class, which is the lightest weight class for women in the UFC at 115. And if you know anything about fighting, heavyweights usually get the titles, but the lighter weights have a lot more action that goes on in these fights. And the three other weight classes that are fought by the women are flyweight at 125, bantamweight at 135, and featherweight at 145. Now, Zhang was born to be a fighter, or at least her parents made her that way. Growing up in China, her parents were not wealthy, and she literally was put into martial arts at the age of 6. But also, as she grew up, she practiced other sports such as soccer, track, and table tennis. And by the age of 12, her parents saw that she was excelling in martial arts, so she went to a special martial arts school to specialize in a Chinese wrestling form called Sai Jiao, so she could get even more training. And she would win multiple championships for her province. But a back injury that she sustained caused her to kind of get out of the sport of fighting by the age of 17. So she would just be working odd jobs such as a teacher, hotel clerk, working at a supermarket. And then she began to go to a gym and work as a fitness instructor. And this is where she saw Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and got back into fighting. And she made her first MMA fight in 2013, where she actually lost a unanimous decision, but would go on to win 11 straight fights from there and continue that success all the way to making it to the UFC in 2018, where she made her debut in UFC 227. And she would continue her success that whole first year to get the chance at the Women's Strawweight Championship in 2019 at UFC Fight Night 157, taking on Jessica Andrade, which she won with a first-round technical knockout, meaning she was the very first UFC champion ever come from China, men or women's. And in her first title defense, she would go against former strawweight champion Joanna Jedrzejczyk on March 7th, 2020, UFC 248. Now let's see who her competitor was in that fight. Joanna Jedrzejczyk is a Poland-born fighter who got into Muay Thai when she was 16, when she was getting more into fitness. And this led her to actually compete in national and European tournaments, especially in Muay Thai and kickboxing, which she did for 10 years, winning over 60 matches. And she would win 6 Muay Thai gold medals for the IFMA. But she made her professional MMA debut in 2012, winning her first fight by a unanimous decision. And she would continue that success, and within 2 years, she would be signed by UFC and make her debut fighting as a strawweight on July 26, 2014, beating Jolina Lima in a unanimous decision. Then she would go on to face Carla Esperanza to win the UFC Strawweight Championship on March 14, 2015, which she won by a TKO in the second round and became the first UFC title holder from Poland and the first female European UFC champion. And she would continue to defend her title over 5 times. But in her 6th title defense, she faced Rose Namajunas at UFC 217 in 2017. And in a huge upset, she lost to Rose's first professional fight. And she would have a rematch versus Rose and again lose in a unanimous decision. So at this time, she actually went up a weight class to the flyweight, but this didn't help either as she still lost her fight at the flyweight. So she returned back to the strawweight to now fight Zhang Weili at UFC 248. That brings us to arguably one of the greatest fights in UFC history. UFC 248, Weili versus Joanna. So the fight takes place on March 7, 2020 at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. And this fight is actually listed as the main event for UFC, as we have the champion versus the former champion coming together for the fight. Now, there was multiple challenges at this time, as it was March 7th, 2020, and on March 11th is when everything shut down in America due to COVID. But Zhang Weili was coming from China, where everything was getting shut down even earlier. So it took her weeks and weeks to set up everything to come back to this. She went to Dubai, and then she went to America, and then she had to wait 2 weeks, and it was just a challenge for her to even get to Vegas, but she wanted this fight. And in the first round, it started out strong, as both fighters were relentless. There was jabs going back and forth so many times, and which is why many people claim that this is one of the greatest fights, as it was non-stop action. And Zhang's strategy was to offer relentless pressure, and she did, with jabs back and forth, really taking a hold of the fight that first round. But in the second round, the intensity ramped up. And again, Zhang came out looking on top that first round. But in the third round, the fight was taking a toll. Though the fight was still close, Zhang was coming out ahead in the first 2 rounds, but Joanna was still close. But she started to swell up on her forehead, but that didn't stop her from coming out of round 3 ahead on the fight. But by the 4th round, Joanna's head started to grow. And if you look at pictures of it, she kind of looks like there's something wrong with her in the fight. She had something called a hematoma, which is an excess swelling on her forehead. And she was fine. It hurt, but most fighters are used to being hurt. But it made it more of a dramatic fight. And it seemed like Zhang was really focused on hitting that particular area, making it worse and worse. But that 4th round seemed to come out to a split. And then we come to the 5th round, where both fighters came out landing as many blows as possible. But after that round, the judges came out for a decision. And in a split decision, Zhang Weili narrowly won the fight, that showcased skills and punches beyond belief. And the fight goes down in the memory of almost everyone that's seen it or goes back to watch it again. As you can, go on YouTube, you can search it, watch it. It's about a 30-minute video, and you will not be disappointed in the fight quality. And after this, Zhang defends her title again, goes up against Rose Namajunas, and loses her title the following year at UFC 268. But that doesn't stop the rematch from taking place on June 11, 2022, which became another great sensation as the fight continued. But again, Zhang came out on top. And the following fight she had at UFC 281, she would face Carla Espinoza for the strawweight championship again in 2022 and gain her title back, which she still holds to this day as of June 2024. Joanna Jedrzejczyk announced her retirement after the UFC 227 rematch versus Zhang, saying it's been 20 years, she's 35 years old, she wants to be a mom, a businesswoman, and she appreciates everything she's been giving, but she's going to move on. And she's being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame this year, July 2024. Both these fighters were great for the sport of women's UFC, as well as just UFC in general. Help grow the sport. The more publicity you give to women's sports, you can see how successful it can be, as this was arguably one of the greatest fights, men or women, that you could ever see. And I want to thank Cody Chips for suggesting this topic. And if you want to suggest a topic, please leave us a review wherever we're listening. Leave us your name and the topic you want us to cover, and we'll get that made just for you. Come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History.